Hello. Okay. So, I literally just finished watching the Game of Thrones finale just like a minute ago, and I I just wanted to get my thoughts out about how the finale, the final season, the entire show went out. And so, if you don't want any of that spoiled, I mean this, if you do not want spoilers for the finale of Game of Thrones, for the final season of Game of Thrones, for the entire show of Game of Thrones, I will be talking about it all, so spoiler alert. Please keep that in mind. I will be spoiling stuff. If you don't mind, then I guess I'll proceed. So, I guess to talk about the show, I kind of have to talk about the whole thing, which is kind of what I was alluding to a second ago. I can't just only talk about the final season or this final episode because, I mean, there's got to be a basis to it, you know? Anyway, so Game of Thrones, and the show at least, is kind of a tale of two halves. The first 4 seasons are amazing. They really are. And there's two big reasons for that. Two huge reasons that Game of Thrones was as great as it was. First one is that it's character driven. Everything that happens isn't happening to further the plot. It's happening because it's characters doing what they would do in any given situation and making decisions that's get out of here, mosquito. That's based around, it's their decisions. Things happen because people decide things, they make mistakes, they have their flaws, and so on. Get out of here, mosquito. And the second reason that Game of Thrones, the first 4 seasons at least, were fantastic were because it subverted the expectations. And it went hand in hand with the characters, because the way that it would do things was that it spent a lot of time just having people sit around and talk and plan things, discuss things, lie to each other, go behind each other's backs, and try to convince people to do things, of all sorts of things. It spent a lot of time just setting tables. It had patience to set up their characters. We grew to love characters like Tyrion, Ned, Robb, etc., because we had time to sit with them, learn who they... Get out of here, fucking mosquito. I swear. Anyway, we had time to sit down with them, get to know them, learn about what they want to do and why they want to do things. And this doesn't just go with the favorites, the characters that we all like. It goes with the people that were hated in that show too. Everything that happens in the first 4 seasons, well, not everything, but generally was great because, my god, this mosquito will not leave you alone. Anyway, it was great because... Get out here. Sorry. It was great because the things that Joffrey did, the things that Tywin did, the things that Walder Frey or Ramsay or anyone else did made sense to them. Cersei, everything she did, so on. So the great plot twist that happened in Game of Thrones happened because it fit with the characters. Ned dying was a big shock to people who hadn't read the books, who were completely going to Game of Thrones because, I mean, why shouldn't they be completely shocked? He's the main character. He's basically the Aragorn of Game of Thrones. He's not Frodo, of course, but he's Aragorn. He is that honorable leader that's well respected. God damn it! I wish these mosquitoes would just go. Maybe I'll be safer over here. I'll hide in a corner. Maybe then the mosquitoes can't get me. Anyway, but the thing is that Ned Stark dying in season 1, which, yes, again, I'm going over spoilers, happened because of how the characters interacted with other people in the show, their decisions, their choices. Ned was a very honorable man. He was smart enough to begin to play the Game of Thrones, so to speak, but he wasn't smart in that way, the way that, Tyrion and Varys and Cersei are, because he wasn't going to sacrifice his honor and sacrifice doing what was right over doing what he needed to do to survive. And it's not even that he wouldn't do what he needed to do to survive, it's just that he didn't see it coming half the time. Like, he wasn't capable of betraying people in the same way that many others were when it came to it. So, him not being the kind of person to do that led him to being where he was, captured by Jaime, so on, and ending up in the situation where he was, and Joffrey being the person he was, which, a brat, a very blood-hungry brat. He made a very big show of killing Ned, which was shocking to the audience. It subverted our expectations. We all thought there had to be some way that Ned survived, because in most other series, that's what would have happened. Granted, it was Sean Bean, so we should have seen it coming, but because, he always dies. It's what he does best. He survived, what was it called? What was that game called? The one with the Adam Sandler movie with the video games. I don't remember. Anyway, he survived that. And besides that, though, he gets killed a lot. Anyway, and then if you take some of the bigger moments, like the Red Wedding, for example, they happened, like, they weren't just plot twists, is what I'm getting at. They were plot twists that made sense because of the characters and their decisions. Like, Robb and all of the Stark armies dying at the Red Wedding was because of Robb's mistakes. It made sense because it wasn't just a plot twist out of nowhere. It wasn't just the writers going, "Ha, gotcha." It was the characters in this world doing what made sense, and looking back on it, we're not mad at it. We're shocked that it happened, but we're going, we should have seen that coming, instead of, how could I possibly have seen that coming? Because it made sense, because Robb's mistake was marrying for love and not marrying for what he needed, which was a political alliance. And Frey did what was right to him, which was settling the score and getting his revenge on Robb for his personal insult to Walder Frey and not marrying his daughter. And of course, Roose Bolton and Tywin Lannister set it up because it makes sense to them. They are both cold, cunning men who will take out their enemies, like sweep their legs, instead of having to fight a fair fight and lose. Like, they're smart men. They don't want to have to take the risk of having a fair fight. So, taking out the Robb Stark before he can even reach King's Landing makes sense, and all of it makes sense. It makes sense for those characters to do those things. And it's stuff like that, whether it comes to Tyrion killing Tywin, or the Mountain killing the Viper, or, I don't know, all sorts of things in the first 4 seasons. It made sense. It was subverting expectations, and it was very character-driven. Now we can start to see, in seasons 5 and 6, that starts to fall apart a little bit. It's still Game of Thrones. It's still great. But, like, some things are happening for the convenience of plot, and people are moving around the country a lot faster than they were. Because, the thing about the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones is that it was very, very slow. It took Robb Stark a season and a half just to get to Walder Frey, let alone King's Landing. And it took half the season just for King Robert and all of his people, and Ned and all them, to get to King's Landing in the first season. And they weren't even an army being stopped by anyone. They weren't having to fight a war. They were just going from one place to another. But then in season 5, in season 6, and of course in season 7 and 8, we see people flying around, you know, and it's not for the convenience of character. It's to get people where they need to be. It's for the convenience of plot, which is why that seasons 5 and 6 weren't quite as good. They were still good. I mean, it was mainly carried by Ramsay, honestly. Ramsay carried those seasons. And it was still good. It was still good. It still subverted expectations to an extent. And it was still fairly character-driven. And the characters still felt like themselves. In season 7, that's when things start really going downhill and the show's not itself. A lot of characters... I mean, they kind of did for 5 and 6, too, but, like, a lot of fan favorites have plot armor, and, you know, they're not dying in places where they should be, and things are happening where, you know, like, characters are surviving miraculous things, and, or coming back and, like, oh, I thought they were dead. Like, the Hound, for example. He was supposed to be dead. And, like, One really great thing about season 7 was just Olenna, because I mean she was amazing for her entire screen time. You can't deny that. She was amazing. But I think possibly the worst season of the worst episode of Game of Thrones came in season 7, whenever Jon and all the rest, and, you know, his merry band of fighters, you know, with the Hound, Sir Beric, Beric, I think, and a handful of others are all off in the north to capture one of the dead so that they can prove it to everyone else in King's Landing that there is a threat to the north. And man, that episode is so bad. It went full Walking Dead, which, no offense to Walking Dead, but Walking Dead is nothing like Game of Thrones. It's not the same show. And trying to make Game of Thrones like Walking Dead, even if just for that one episode, it was very bad. It was just so bad. Characters fight off an army of the dead, and no one's dying, except whenever it's convenient for the plot or to make a big emotional moment, because most of these characters have plot armor. They're not going to kill Jon Snow, they're not going to kill the Hound, because we still need them for later, and whoever else was there, I don't remember, but like they're literally sitting on a rock in a sea of zombies, and it's just very Walking Dead. And the thing is, Walking Dead kills off characters too. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but like usually it's to make a big emotional impact, and it just does it for shock value. You know, it does it for plot and not for character driven. It doesn't subvert expectations, it's just a fun zombie show. And so, yeah, and then characters sacrifice themselves to keep Jon Snow alive, just because, you know, at that point he's the main character. And, you know, it's very, very plot driven and not character driven. And then in season 8, which is the main thing I wanted to talk about here, because, you know, all these other seasons happened at least a year ago. We've had them for a while. All this was just a basis to get up to now, season 8. We only had 6 episodes. 2 regular ones and then 4 long ones at the end. Overall, I actually think the first 2 weren't great, but they were actually pretty good. It felt like Game of Thrones again, which I was surprised by. We had a lot of table setting. Not much happened those first 2 episodes. And it was a lot of fan service, which, honestly, I'm not going to be shocked that it had it. And it was nice. It was nice. I'm not going to complain about having fan service, although Game of Thrones isn't a show that would normally have fan service. But, you know, it's nice to have all these characters meeting together again and having these moments before everything goes to hell. And overall, I think the first 2 episodes were actually not great, but I didn't mind them at all, besides, you know, a couple of nitpicks here or there. Then comes episode 3. Again, they killed a lot of characters for shock value, but whether it was, I think her name's Lyanna, I think, you know, the Mormont, or Jorah, or Theon, or Beric, or whoever else, they were killing these people off not because... No, they were killing them off because just to have a shock value. Like, it didn't feel like they were killing them off. It felt like they were just saying, see, we're not afraid to kill off known characters. Although none of them were that important moving forward, besides maybe Jorah. It just felt like they were sacrifices to protect the real important players. Dany, Jon, and Arya at that point. While Tyrion and Sansa are just kind of off to the side. And then, of course, if you know what happened, then next comes where Arya... I'm just going to skip over most of the fight, because, I mean, it's not great, it's not bad, it's just a zombie war. A lot of the decisions they made were stupid as far as defending the castle, but, I mean, I don't have high expectations for Game of Thrones by this point, so it's like, it's par for the course. I'm not going to make a big deal over it. It happened. And then, I think what the big issue was, as far as like Arya killing the Night King, it's not what actually happened. I don't have a problem with Arya killing the Night King. It's just that how everything was set up. And which is kind of my problem with both episode 3 and 4. It's just kind of... Because in a way, these are just set up for the final 2 episodes. If you can kind of look at it like that. What happened in episode 3 and episode 4 were just set up to get us to episode 5 and episode 6. And I think like a lot of the plot points that happen in the season, I'm not all that mad about. At least when it comes to episode 5 and 6, I actually really enjoyed those episodes. They weren't Game of Thrones, but they felt more Shakespearean. It wasn't the same show, but it was still good, if that makes sense. At least parts of it, most of it, I'd say. I do have a big nitpick with episode 6, and I'll get to that in a minute, I guess. Anyway, so I think the big issue with season 8 as a whole is just that, like, you had 2 big enemies here. 2 big goals. You had to finish the series, which, you know, would involve a lot of who's going to be king, who's going to backstab who's going to die. And then you had the big confrontation with the dead, the Night King. But you had to do one before the other, because those aren't things you can do at the same time, unfortunately. You can't have a big political battle while the dead are attacking the city. Because, you know, then you're just wasting your time and killing off people you'll need. You can't do that at the same time. So, the show decides to take down the Night King first. It's the more pressing problem, I suppose. And of course, Cersei doesn't join in because she's like, well, either everyone dies and I'll just get on a boat and leave and fuck this place, or they win and I have King's Landing. Ha ha ha. Which, I can't blame her. It's the right move for her. I'm not going to get mad at that. Anyway, so the big problem with the series is that you either have to do one or the other, which undermines which one comes last, which one becomes the more important one at the sacrifice of the other, which was the problem before season 8 even started. They were going to have to face this issue, and it was always going to be an issue. There was no way around it. Because either you take out the Night King first, and then, oh, this big, great, impending threat to humanity was just the battle before the final battle, or all this political, or the show is just going to end up becoming a big battle versus death, which was never what Game of Thrones was. And it's just kind of becoming that episode that I harked on from season 7 on a bigger scale, which, if anything, makes it worse. And that's how we end the series, and it would be on a very, very bad note if it's just down to fight against the Night King. And I think they chose the better option of the two, but like, for this, I wish they'd given it more time. the Night King, it just kind of felt, because like I said, the Night King didn't feel like the final threat that he was supposed to be. He didn't feel like, oh, he's gonna kill us all. It just felt like, oh, he's okay. We took care of him. Now let's get on to Cersei, the real battle. We got him done in an episode. We took down everything that the show had been building up to from the very first scene in an episode. It's done with. Now let's get on to the real battle. And so there we get to episode 4, which honestly was just boring. It was just boring, that's all I had to say about it. I think a lot of the decisions they made were stupid. Like, you can't kill off Varys like that. Which is also same thing for Littlefinger. Varys and Littlefinger have been running the show behind the scenes for the entire show. They are the most important parts of Game of Thrones, if we're being honest. More than Tyrion, more than Jon, more than anyone else. It was because of Varys and Littlefinger. And neither of them got the send-off that they deserved. And it's just, get out of here, bug. They just didn't. I probably should have said this at first, but yeah. Never mind, I won't even mention it. It's too late already, I'm 20 minutes in. Okay. So one of the things I did really hate about episode 4 was just that it tried to get Brienne and Jaime together, and then split them up by the end of the episode, which, that was never their relationship to me. Brienne was the one person that Jaime trusted with what really happened when he killed the king. That's what Brienne is to him, the one person who was honorable enough for him to trust with a secret like that. It's not a relationship, a romantic interest that he would pursue and then abandon, which I'm not even mad that he abandoned her, because they never should have done it to begin with. I know plenty of people would have shipped them together, but I don't think that relationship was something that the show should have ever had. He should have always gone back to Cersei, because honestly, that's who he loves. For all her flaws, that's who he loves. Anyway, I'm not going to get too much onto Jaime. That was one of just the smaller problems with this season, if anything. Anyway, the episode 4 was just boring. And I think that if they'd done episode 3 and episode 4 right, episode 5 and 6 would have been great instead of just good. I actually liked episodes 5 and 6. Well, episode 6 is kind of a tale of two halves, honestly. Anyway, episode 5, a lot of the things that happen in this episode, I have no problem with. If you take down what happened and put it in plot points, I have no problem with it. A lot of it was fun. It was very interesting to see happen, and it was just overall a decent episode. It could have been great if things had been set up better in episode 4 and episode 3 and so on. If they'd used season 8, if they'd met their potential, as it were. But they didn't, and thus episode 5 was just good. And I'm fine with the direction they took with Dany and with killing everyone that they killed and who all survived. And that's episode 5. The Clegane Bowl was was really fun, although I'm not sure about a few things about it. And Arya did nothing whenever she got to the Red Keep and just ran around King's Landing for a bit. And it seemed like she was going to have something important to do in episode 6, but she never did. Just gonna go ahead and say that. Okay, so now we get to episode 6, the finale. The finale of everything we've come to, Game of Thrones. And I guess I should start by talking about Jon Snow. Because I'm going to need to talk about both him and Dany to really preface this episode. Because those two and Tyrion are what really, really make this episode. And honestly, it makes sense because those are probably the 3 biggest fan favorites, save for Arya, maybe. Like, those 4 are the biggest characters, and there's a reason that they've made it this far. And I don't think anyone was as beloved besides maybe Ned that died throughout the series. Like, even... Yeah. Anyway, Jon... The thing about the subverting expectations thing is that
he was kind of the character that was from the original fantasy series. He is, in a lot of ways, that, like, they gave him a lot of underdog aspects by making him, you know, a bastard and all sorts of things, at least in the beginning. But, in a lot of ways, he was just that honorable young man who could be great, but had a lot of, he was too moral to quite fit in with Game of Thrones, the show around him. It was weird to see. And because, you know, in any other show, he would be the main character, and, you know, based on how the second half goes, he is the main character. Although, if Game of Thrones had still been working the same way it had the first 4 seasons, he probably would have stayed dead after he died at the end of season 5. Actually, I think it was season 5, yeah. He probably would have stayed dead. He would never come back. And yeah, I think he does die at the end of the 5th book, if I remember correctly. It's been a long time since I've read them. But yeah, I think he does die at the very end, and I think he will probably stay dead. I hope he does, at least. Because it makes more sense as far as the books go. And, you know, George R. R. Martin, I don't think, will want to take the same route he did in the show. Well, not he, but they took in the show. Anyway, like, he's like one of the main people I mean as far as having plot armor. And it makes sense because he's that main character type that, you know, and, you know, this show has been kind of building him up to replace Ned. He is his father's son for all intents and purposes. Yeah, Ned's not his father, but in all the ways that matter, he is. He is Ned's true-born son, if it makes any sense. Like, Jon is the one that is like Ned and will become like Ned. And I think that the later seasons actually did a really good job of buying into that. After he comes back to life, I actually like Jon better because it starts to become where he's given all these things that he doesn't want. He doesn't want to be the one making these decisions because he understands that there will be negative moments for him. Like, he understands that being in charge means he's the one that has to execute people, and he's the one that has to make the tough decisions and let people die, and so on. Jon understands that, and he doesn't want power. He doesn't want to... Like, he doesn't want to be the commander of the Wall. He doesn't want to be King of the North. He doesn't want to lead the battle against Ramsay. He doesn't want to kill Dany. He doesn't want to bend the knee to Dany, but he does everything because he's just a good guy. And I actually end up liking Jon a lot better towards the end of the series, where he actually just kind of becomes Ned. He becomes Ned's son, instead of just the archetypical main character that we would have in any other fantasy setting. Like, he doesn't become Arthur, if that makes sense. He becomes Ned Stark, and I like that. I really do like that. I like that aspect to his character. I end up liking Jon a lot better by the end of the show. And so, now I'll talk about Dany real quick. I'll leave it at just this. The show had teased it. I didn't think they would actually go for the Mad Queen aspect. I thought... I'm kind of mad that MatPat, of all people, was right about things. I figured she was going to be one of the good guys, and that she might die at some point, but... Or prove that she's not capable of being queen, but I didn't think she'd burn down a city. But I'm not mad about that. It kind of felt like they had done that somewhat justice throughout the previous seasons. Maybe not the past 2 episodes. Like I said, it would have been a lot better if they'd set her up better to be at this point. If the past few episodes had set up Dany better to be the person that becomes the Mad Queen, the person that ends up where she needs to be. You know, like, I'm not mad about how things ended. I'm just mad about how they were set up. If that makes sense. And so, she burns down King's Landing, and we get to the final episode. And frankly, this final episode, the finale, was just a tale of 2 episodes. I loved the first half. It felt right by everything. It wasn't Game of Thrones, at least by how the first 4 seasons would go, but it felt very epic and Shakespearean. It felt like a true tragedy where, man, we became the villains, and my actions are what put this tyrant up there that claims to be freeing everyone. And it felt, and I was fine with like everything that was happening, besides just that Arya amounted to nothing in the entire episode. Well, besides that, at least. Like, she did nothing after she killed the Night King. She was just kind of there. And everything, up until the moment that Jon stabbed Dany, which, yeah, just a reminder, there are spoilers in this. I was fine with everything that happened. Then Drogon came, and it looked like he was going to burn down Jon. And in my head, I was thinking, okay, I am fine with whatever happens here. Either he doesn't kill Jon, and Jon becomes king, and honestly, Jon is probably the best guy for it. I wouldn't have thought it a couple seasons ago, but I think Jon probably is the only one that can rule them at this point. And, you know, sit on the end and it feel right. Which, you know, kind of, again, he's the only one I think could be right on sitting on the throne. So having who really ends up there is kind of, it does really annoy me a bit because it feels so unearned. It really does feel unearned. And so either he dies here, and it's fitting because both the Targaryens die, and neither of the big two contenders to end up on the throne, which is probably as close as we're going to get to subverting expectations as we'll get at this point. I'm fine with that. Get out of here, bug. And so he doesn't kill Jon. He carries off Dany's body to who knows where. I don't care at this point. And I figured Jon's probably going to end up king somehow. And we've still got half an episode to figure everything out. Which I was kind of surprised by. I figured that it would take a lot longer to get to where it was going to get to than it actually did. Honestly, I expected it to either happen in the beginning or happen in the end, not in the middle. Like, I expected either while Dany was giving her speech about freeing everyone, her head was just going to be sliced off at any moment by Jon, because he'd figured out what he had to do without Tyrion having to tell him anything. Or it was going to take until the end of the episode for him to do what he had to do, and then he'd sit down on that Iron Throne and be king, while his lover's body is just bleeding out in front of him. And that would be how the show would end. And I'm not mad about being wrong. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with how they ended Dany's show. I'm not mad about anything that happened in that first half, honestly. It's the second half where the problems arise, I think. It just... nothing about that second half. Maybe, okay, there is a part of that second half that felt great, and I'll get to that in a minute. Two parts, I guess. Okay. The problems arise, I think, is just that meeting of, like, all the lords. And I'm just kind of sitting here like, okay, so these are the people that are going to decide what's going to happen to be king now? We've got Sam fucking Tarly deciding who's going to be king? And just... it felt so stupid as it was happening. It's like, hey, we're going to decide who's king. Like, that's not how it's going to work. This is stupid. And then it got even stupider when Sam spoke up and said, well, why are we deciding? Why can't we have everyone deciding? And for a moment, I honestly thought that's how the show was going to end. I honestly thought they might just be like, you know what? We're going to have democracy! Westeros. Let the people decide who's king. We're gonna be a republic now. And then everyone laughed, and I'm just like, thank you. I love democracy in our modern society, don't get me wrong, but like, if that's how Game of Thrones ends, it would be the even worse ending than I would have thought. This was literally a meme that people joked about. It was just a joke thrown about, and if they actually ended it that way, I was gonna be mad. But everyone laughed at Sam, as they should, and And we're not going to have democracy. Not in my medieval fantasies. So then they'd be like, let's choose who's going to be king. And who do you think? Tyrion, for some reason. And then Tyrion... I love you, Tyrion, but this was a... Why? Why? He picks Bran fucking Stark. The dude who just sits there and stares into space all fucking day for the past 3 seasons. That's all he's done. This feels so unearned. I get what his whole explanation of, like, oh, he remembers everything and he doesn't want it. And, yeah, who else to lead us but someone who knows our past and can learn from our mistakes and yada yada. And I'm just... Anyone would have been more appealing than Bran. He was that one choice that where people would talk about who would become king at the end of Game of Thrones, and I'm just sitting here like, anyone but him. I'll take Sam over him. And I know I've been shitting on Sam for a minute. I don't hate Sam. Sam's cool. It's just like he is the joke character. I'd rather take Sam on the throne at this point than Bran. It just feels so unearned. He's literally done nothing for the past 2 or 3 seasons. Hell, you could argue he didn't do much before that either. Bran being king feels so unearned. And seeing after that what they did with Jon, having him just sent to the wall again. I know it's supposed to just be like a kick to the gut for everyone's like, oh, now Jon ended up back on the wall. Man, that sucks, doesn't it? And I just kind of wish that Drogon had burned in. It would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. It would have been, if anything, it would have been better. The fighting wouldn't have been over what happened to Jon. It would have been over the people that love Cersei and the people that love Jon are fighting over each other, over who would win, over how they should settle this. And I would have preferred that, I think. And okay, and then I guess I'll get to the 2 good things that happened in that back half. Right? Yeah, 3 actually. I forgot about one smaller one. That smaller one being Brienne writing in the book. That felt nice. Although I'm kind of surprised that even gave Jaime that moment of having him written down in the book. Okay. And so the second thing, which is probably the biggest, I think, was just seeing Bran's advisors, which were Tyrion, Davos, Bronn, and Sam, bickering. It made the episode, honestly. I loved it. I'm just glad that Bronn survived. Going into this episode, before I'd seen it, that was all I really wanted. It was just, don't kill Bronn. He's the only one who still felt like himself. I just want Bronn to survive. That's it. Please just let me keep Bronn. And he survives, and he does his best quibbling with everyone, and it's amazing. As he's just arguing over being the master of coin, and arguing over how keeping the brothels, and who cares about the ships, and oh, you're the master of grammar now. I love Bronn. I'm so glad he survived. And the other thing, which is I guess big as far as thematically going, is I really like that final scene of them just showing all the all the Stark children going through their various things, and walking through halls, tightening swords, putting on crowns, walking through halls. I think I already said that. I'm tired. It's very late. Whatever. And I like that scene. It was a nice way to end things. I do think having all the wildlings walk into the forest was a bit weird to end on, but everything, the 3 Stark children walking through wherever they were before that was actually well done, I think. And that's the final episode. I'll briefly mention that Tyrion was great in this episode, and they showed a lot more of him than I thought they would. I never really got around him how he did. If you have any questions for me about what I thought of various things or anything like that, leave a comment. I doubt many people will watch this anyway because my channel's so tiny, but who knows. And I guess I'm done. Leave a like if you liked it. I don't know if anyone made it the full 40 minutes through. I'll be uploading this as soon as I end the video. Who needs to edit? It's for losers. And I guess that's it. See you all next time. Bye.